Have you ever worked 37 years at the same company, raised a child by yourself after your wife got sick, stayed clean for 11 months, and still ended up standing in a hospital parking garage at 7 in the morning with a paper bag of your belongings and nobody on the other end of the phone? That was me. Last February, 58 years old, wearing the same flannel shirt I'd checked in with back in November, standing next to a concrete pillar on level 2 of the Mercy General parking structure in Dayton, Ohio, watching other people's families pull up and collect their people. My daughter never came. I want to be careful about how I say that because it's not the whole story. Nothing ever is. But that morning, that specific morning after 11 weeks in the inpatient program at Lakewood Recovery Center, I had called her the night before. I had called her 2 days before that. I had texted. I'd asked the discharge coordinator, a kind woman named Ms. Albrecht, to call on my behalf because sometimes it landed better coming from a professional. My daughter had told Ms. Albrecht she would be there by 8. It was 9:45 when I finally sat down on the curb. I had $62 in my wallet. My truck was at my daughter's house, where it had been since November, because she'd driven it over after I checked in and said she'd hold on to it for me. My phone was at 11%. And I want to be honest with you about what was going through my head sitting there, because if you've ever been through a program, you know that the first few hours on the outside are the most dangerous ones. Your brain is clear for the first time in years, and all that clarity does is show you everything you lost while you were drinking, all the wreckage, all the people who stopped waiting. I wasn't angry yet. Anger came later. Right then I was just tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. I had been drinking for 6 years. Not the kind of drinking where you have a few too many at the company Christmas party. The kind that starts at noon on a Tuesday and doesn't stop. The kind that costs you your relationship with your only child by degrees, so slowly you almost don't notice until one day you look up and she's not in the room anymore. My wife, Elaine, she passed in 2018. Pancreatic cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to the end. I was not equipped. I don't say that as an excuse. I say it because it's true, and because I've spent 11 weeks learning the difference between an explanation and an excuse, and I want to get that right. I had a daughter who loved me and a house that was paid off and a pension coming in 3 years, and I drank all of it into the ground. My son-in-law, my daughter's husband, a man I'll call Fletcher, had been managing my finances since the previous spring. My daughter had asked me to allow it. She said I kept forgetting to pay bills, which was true, and that Fletcher was good with numbers, which was also true. He worked in commercial real estate. He wore pressed shirts on weekends. He had very firm handshakes and very careful eyes, and I had never fully trusted him, but I trusted my daughter, and she trusted him, so I signed the paperwork. I thought about that paperwork a lot during those 11 weeks in treatment. The thing about getting sober is it doesn't just clear your body, it clears your thinking, and when your thinking clears, you start to remember things you'd blurred over. Conversations that hadn't made sense at the time, documents you'd signed without reading because your hands were shaking, a refinancing that Fletcher had walked me through in September that I couldn't fully reconstruct in my memory no matter how hard I tried. I had talked to my counselor about it, a man named Dr. Okafor, and he'd said to focus on my recovery first and deal with practical matters after discharge. Good advice. Hard to follow. So I'm sitting on that curb in level 2 of the Mercy General garage. I was at the hospital for a follow-up the morning of discharge. That's why I was there and not at Lakewood. And I'm watching a pigeon walk in circles near the elevator. And I'm trying to decide whether to call a cab or try my daughter one more time. When I hear footsteps. Excuse me, are you Dwight Calloway? I looked up. The man standing there was maybe 40, maybe a little under. Dark jacket, no tie. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been through something and come out the other side steady. He was looking at me the way you look at someone you recognize but aren't sure about yet. That's me, I said. He exhaled. Not a relieved exhale, more like the kind you do when something you suspected turns out to be true. I thought so, he said. He sat down on the curb next to me without being invited, which I found both presumptuous and oddly comforting. You don't know me. My name is Theo Bassett. I don't expect that name to mean anything to you. He was right, it didn't. You used to live on Crescent Mill Road, he said. The house with the green shutters. You had a beagle named Captain? I stared at him. I was 17, he said. Winter of 2001. You found me sleeping in the bed of your pickup truck. It was 11 degrees. I was quiet for a long time, I remembered. I had forgotten, actually, the way you forget most of the small things you do when you're just living your life and not keeping score. But sitting there on that curb with the details coming back, the truck, the cold, the skinny kid with no coat curled up under a moving blanket, I kept back there. It came back whole. He had been running from something. I hadn't asked what. I'd brought him inside, made him eat soup, let him sleep on the couch for 3 nights. Elaine had not been bothered by this at all, which is something I should have expected. We'd given him $120 when he left, because that was what we had in the emergency envelope in the kitchen drawer. He'd written down our address on a piece of paper and promised to pay it back. "You never cashed the money order," he said. "I don't remember getting one. I sent it about 8 months later, $40. All I had." He paused. "I figured you didn't need it." "We didn't," I said. "But I'm sorry I didn't write back. I would have wanted to know you were okay." "I am," he said. "Better than okay." He told me some of it then. He'd gotten himself into a GED program, community college after that, then a law degree from Ohio State, nights and weekends while he worked full-time. He was a property attorney now, had been for 11 years. He lived in Columbus. He was in Dayton for a closing and had stopped at Mercy General because his client was having a procedure done. "I saw you from across the garage," he said. "I wasn't sure, but then I was." He looked at the paper bag between my feet. "Discharge?" he asked. "This morning." He nodded. He didn't ask from what. I told him anyway, because at that point, what was the point of not telling anyone? 11 weeks. Alcohol. The program at Lakewood.
"Is someone coming for you?" he said.
"My daughter was supposed to be." He looked at my phone. "Do you want to try her again?" "I've tried 4 times. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me. It's none of my business. Go ahead." "You said your daughter was supposed to come. Is she the one managing things for you while you were in?" I looked at him. "Her husband is." Something shifted in his expression. Not alarm exactly. More like recognition. "What kind of things?" he said. And I told him the financial power of attorney I'd signed in March, the refinance in September, the fact that I had tried to check my bank balance from the facility's computer 2 weeks ago, and the login hadn't worked. And when I'd called the bank, the automated system had routed me to a department I didn't recognize, and I'd been on hold for 40 minutes before I gave up. Theo Bassett sat very still while I talked. When I finished, he said, "Dwight, I need you to listen to me carefully. What you just described, the POA, the refinance, the locked account, that pattern has a name. I see it in my work. Not often, but enough. It's called financial elder exploitation, and in Ohio it is a felony." I heard the word felony and something in my chest went strange. "My son-in-law is not," I started. "I'm not saying what he is," Theo said carefully. "I'm saying what it looks like, and I'm saying you need information before you go home." He paused. "Do you have somewhere to be right now?" I looked at the pigeon, still walking in circles. "Not particularly," I said. He drove me to a diner on Salem Avenue, the kind with laminate menus and coffee that comes in a ceramic mug without you asking. I had eggs and toast. I hadn't eaten a full breakfast in 11 weeks that I hadn't eaten in a facility, and there was something about choosing your own food and sitting in a real booth that I hadn't expected to feel so significant. Theo made 3 phone calls while I ate. I didn't ask who he was calling. I watched people come and go through the front door of the diner, people with ordinary mornings, people whose daughters had picked them up, and I thought about Elaine, the way I always think about Elaine when I'm trying to stay steady. She would have been so angry at me for those 6 years. She also would have driven to Lakewood herself the morning of my discharge, 40 minutes each way, with a thermos of coffee and probably a container of her chicken soup, because that was who she was, and I had not let myself miss her clearly in so long that doing it now, clear-headed, felt like something tearing open and cleaning out at the same time. "Okay," Theo said, coming back to the table. "Here's what I know." He set his phone down between us. He had pulled up my county's property records. My house, the house on Crescent Mill Road, the same house, the house with the green shutters that Elaine had picked out in 1994, had been refinanced in September. The new loan was for significantly more than the original remaining balance. The difference, roughly $84,000, had been disbursed at closing. I put my fork down. "It went to a company," Theo said. "An LLC. I can't tell you right now who owns it, but the registered agent address is a commercial mailbox service in Centerville." He looked at me. "Where does Fletcher work?" "He has an office in Centerville," I said. Theo nodded slowly. "The account change was done through the POA," he said, "which is why your login stopped working. The account was restructured. Your name is still on it technically, but the authorized user has been changed." I sat with that for a while. I want to be honest about what that felt like, because I think people sometimes expect rage in a moment like that, and I didn't feel rage right away. What I felt first was something quieter and heavier, a kind of grief for my own stupidity. For every glass I'd poured that had cost me my sharpness, my attentiveness, my ability to notice what was happening around me. Elaine would have seen Fletcher clearly from the beginning. She had always seen people clearly. I had let grief hollow me out, and then I had let someone pour poison into the hollow. Then the anger came. It came slowly and then all at once, the way that kind of anger does, and it settled in my sternum like something with weight, and I sat there in that diner with my half-eaten eggs and let it be there. Because Dr. Okafor had also taught me that feeling anger is not the same as acting on it, and that the most powerful thing you can do with rage is aim it. What do I do? I said. First thing, Theo said, is get you somewhere stable. Not your daughter's house. Somewhere neutral. I have a brother in Fairborn. Good. Call him. He pulled a business card from his jacket. Second thing is you call me tomorrow morning, and I'm going to refer you to a colleague of mine who handles exactly this kind of case. Her name is Abbott, she's aggressive, and she owes me a favor. He slid the card across the table. Third thing, and I need you to hear this. Your daughter may not know the full picture. People in these situations sometimes don't. I picked up the card. She didn't come to pick me up, I said. I know. He said it simply, without qualification, the way you acknowledge something that hurts without trying to fix it. That's real, and it may have a real explanation or it may not. But you don't know yet which one it is. My brother Walt, not my son-in-law, my actual brother, younger than me by 4 years, retired from the fire department, wide as a doorframe and steady as a post. He came and picked me up from the diner in 40 minutes. He didn't say much on the drive to Fairborn. Walt has never been a big talker. He made up the guest room, put a frozen lasagna in the oven, and then sat down across from me at his kitchen table and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. By the time I finished, the lasagna had been done for 20 minutes, and neither of us had moved to get it. Walt put both hands flat on the table and looked at them for a long moment. "Fletcher," he said. "Yeah, I never liked him. I know. I said so at the wedding. I know, Walt." He got up and got the lasagna. The next 3 months were not simple, and I won't pretend they were. I spoke to Theo's colleague, an attorney named Miss Abbott, the following morning. She was exactly what Theo had described. She asked me 16 very specific questions, took notes on all of them, and then said, "Mr. Calloway, you have been robbed. The question is how much and through how many instruments, and I am going to find out." She filed an emergency motion to freeze the LLC account within the week. Fletcher retained a lawyer of his own. There were letters. There were counter letters. There was a deposition I had to sit through in a conference room downtown where Fletcher sat across from me in a pressed shirt and very careful eyes. And I looked at him steadily the whole time without flinching, which I mention only because 6 months earlier I could not have done that. My daughter called me 3 weeks into it. I want to tell you exactly how that call went because it matters. She called on a Thursday evening. I was sitting on Walt's back porch watching the sky go orange. I almost didn't answer. I sat there looking at her name on the screen for 4 rings, and then I picked up. "Dad," she said. Just that one word, and something in her voice was different than it had been in 2 years. Something had come unfastened. "I'm here," I said. She cried for a while before she could talk, and I let her because I had also cried in those 3 months, in private in Walt's guest bathroom with the water running because I am 58 years old and still learning that grief doesn't care where you are when it finally comes for you. She told me she hadn't known. About the LLC, about the refinancing details. Fletcher had told her the refinance was to lower the monthly payment, which was technically true in the most minimal possible sense of the word true. She had not been at the closing. She had not seen the disbursement. She had trusted him the way I had trusted her, in a chain of trust that he had exploited from both ends. She told me she hadn't come to pick me up because Fletcher had told her I'd arranged my own transportation, that Miss Albrecht had sorted it. She'd been confused and had tried to call the facility and gotten a voicemail, and by then she'd assumed I was already gone. I don't know if I believe every part of that, and I may not ever know. What I know is that she was crying on the phone, and that I knew her voice, had known her voice since she was 4 days old, and first made a sound at the exact frequency that recalibrates everything inside a parent, and what I heard in it was not performance. "I should have come regardless," she said. "I should have shown up and confirmed it myself, and I didn't. I'm sorry, Dad, I know," I said. "I'm so sorry, I know," I said again. "I'm sorry too. For a lot of years." We talked for 2 hours that night. We talked about Elaine, which we had not done together in a long time. We talked about things we should have talked about years ago and didn't because I was drinking and she was managing me, and neither of us was saying the true things out loud. It was not fixed in one phone call. Families don't work that way. But it was a door opening, and I walked through it. Fletcher settled. Miss Abbott had found 3 separate instruments of financial manipulation: the refinancing disbursement, a changed beneficiary designation on a life insurance policy, and an attempted transfer of title on the house that had been initiated but not yet completed when we filed. The total exposure was substantial. His attorney advised him to settle quietly rather than face a criminal referral, which Ms. Abbott had made clear was the next step. He repaid $71,000. The remainder was tied up in ways that would have taken years to litigate, and Ms. Abbott was honest with me that the math on the remaining balance didn't justify the fight. I accepted that. At 58 years old, coming off the worst 6 years of my life, clean and clear-headed in a way I hadn't been in longer than that. I found I had a different relationship to what was worth fighting for. My house was mine again. The title was restored. The account was restructured in my name alone. My daughter and Fletcher separated that spring. She moved into a rental in Beaver Creek with their 2 kids. We have Sunday dinners now, the 4 of us rotating between her place and mine. She makes Elaine's chicken soup, or a version of it, close enough that it does something to me every time. I think about Theo Bassett sometimes, the version of him I never knew, the 17-year-old in my truck bed in 11-degree weather with no coat and whatever road he was running from, and the chain of small choices that led from that truck bed to a property law degree to a garage in Dayton on exactly the right morning. He sent me a text in April. Just checked in, said Ms. Abbott had reached out and told him it had resolved well. I wrote back, "You changed the outcome of my life twice. First time you probably don't even remember. I won't forget either one." He replied, "You changed mine first. I'm 11 months sober as of this month. I go to meetings on Tuesday and Thursday nights at a church on Wayne Avenue. I have a sponsor named Cliff who is 71 years old and has been sober for 30 years and does not let me feel sorry for myself for more than 90 seconds at a time, which is exactly what I need. My daughter told me last Sunday, washing dishes after dinner while the grandkids destroyed the living room, that she was proud of me. I stood there with a dish towel in my hand and I didn't know what to say, so I just said thank you, which was probably the right answer. Here's what I know now that I didn't know a year ago. The people who try to take from you are counting on the version of you that's too broken to look up. They time it that way on purpose. They wait for your lowest hour, and what they never account for is the stranger who knew you before you fell, the one who remembers what you actually are, who shows up in a parking garage on a cold February morning because something in him said look twice. You cannot manufacture that. You cannot plan for it. But you can spend your life being the kind of person who leaves that possibility open. That's the only thing I know for certain anymore, and right now, it's enough.